Good morning. How are you, Judd?
I'm good. What's going on?
Well, nice win for the fellas on Tuesday night, shootout win. And I think I said the same thing last week. I can't figure out what this hockey team is. Nobody can figure it out yet. Sometimes I'm hoping for a loss because I'm looking toward the draft, but they seem to be winning some of these hockey games.
Well, I think since that debacle in Ottawa, they've reeled off 4 consecutive wins, and I think so in the bigger picture, it's been defense. They played a much more structured game. The goaltending has obviously upped itself here. The special teams have been excellent, and they've spread out the scoring, and that's kind of equated to the wins.
But when you look at tonight's game, and it's against Ottawa again, what do you take from, was 7-2 the last time that they played them? Like, that was probably one of their worst losses of the season. It
was the worst loss of the season. I think it's the only one, and Donnie Sweeney, who was on with us, I think, right after that game, he had mentioned, if you look across the Bruins' losses, and they had gone through a skid there, that was probably the only game, he said, where it looked like we felt sorry for ourselves. And that was an issue for the team last year, that the team was not the hard out that the Bruins had expected, and things started to spiral. When I think back to that game in Ottawa, the Bruins were essentially fine. I think after the first 20 minutes, I want to say it was tied. It might have been 1 apiece, but then things started to unravel. In Ottawa, they have some skilled players. They lit the Bruins up on the power play. They scored 4 times on 5 opportunities. I think you'll see a much different game here tonight.
We always sit here and we talk about goaltending. Like you said, past couple of games, it's been really good, and it's kind of been both Korpisalo and Swayman. Is there, I don't want to say a goaltending controversy or competition, or like, where are they going to go with their goaltending?
There's absolutely competition. There's absolutely competition, and that's what the Bruins want. Mm-hmm. They want these guys to push one another, and that's why, I think one of the refreshing things here early in the season is some of the honesty that we've seen from Marco Sturm. And he said at the start of the season, and the GM Donnie Sweeney had mentioned it, that the way that the goaltending starts are going to be determined is part of it is going to be the schedule, and part of it is going to be how guys are playing. So I don't think that the Bruins, and it wasn't Jeremy Swayman's fault that the team got trounced in Ottawa, but at the same time, okay, this is an opportunity to get Joonas Korpisalo in, and he took the ball and ran. But I think the whole idea is that they're there to push one another, and they felt that last year that wasn't necessarily the case. So if you go back, and we're going to see Linus Ullmark here tonight, and his numbers are not very good, and he's certainly under some pressure in Ottawa. When he and Jeremy Swayman were here, they pushed one another, and it brought the best out of each of those tenders.
You're in a good spot right now, coming off 4 straight wins, but then you've got 5 divisional opponents ahead of you. What do you want to see at the outcome? Obviously, best case scenario would you sweep the next 5, but when you look at this actually, what is a good stretch for you in these 5 games?
I don't know if I can, break down the numbers necessarily, but I think, listen, if you want to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, and especially coming out of the Atlantic Division, some of these teams that you're facing, especially the next 2 opponents, the Ottawa Senators and Toronto Maple Leafs, 2 teams that made the playoffs out of the Atlantic Division last year, you're currently fighting for oxygen in those spots with those teams. You need to be able to take advantage.
Elias Lindholm, do you see him coming back in that 5-game stretch? And what is the injury? I know Sturm's been kind of tight-lipped about it.
I don't know. When we saw the hit both live and on replay, it looked like he and Jordan Greenway went knee to knee.
But it was weird because they went knee to knee, left knee. And then when he was skating off, it was, I don't know if he bent his right knee back because it seemed like the right knee was what he was favoring.
Yeah, I don't know. Listen, when I saw it, it looked like it was a knee issue. The Bruins have not confirmed or said anything in that regard. I have no idea. I really don't. The only thing that Marco Sturm had said was that the MRI that was taken confirmed their beliefs, but he wouldn't say what their beliefs were.
Yeah.
So how long does that take? Is it a knee sprain? I think the fact that we haven't gotten word that he's gone under the knife at this point for whatever ails him is probably a good thing. How long it takes him to come back from that, where exactly the knee was damaged, that we have no idea.
When you look at the Bruins kind of throughout the season and you kind of look at them moving forward, I feel like the most important thing for them, it's going to be a grind because it seems like there's a lot of teams that are fighting for like all these spots. But the thing that they can't get into is where they go on these 6-game losing streaks, 4-game losing streaks. Is that something that they can stay away from, or is this like team going to be a roller coaster up and down?
That's what you're hoping. I think that the way that they're built, Wiggy, is that they're supposed to be in every game, every night, if they defend and play to their identity. And that's essentially what you've seen throughout the first 15 games of the season, minus the game in Ottawa. So I think that we're going to see a lot of 2-1, 3-2, 4-3, which have been a lot of the wins that the Bruins have picked up here in the last couple of weeks. So I think the saying in the National Hockey League is that good teams don't have long losing skids. So if the Bruins are going to show you that they're a playoff team, they have to avoid those.
Are they any closer to figuring out who the captain of the hockey team is going to be?
Not as far as I can tell. I think that they've got a leadership group. They meet regularly. It's guys like David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, some of the guys who are signed long-term. I know Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, Jeremy Swayman. They're all involved in the group. But I think that I think the organization in and of itself, and I don't know if it has to come this year, it may not come next year. I think they're waiting for one guy in particular to emerge. Being a captain is not easy, and I start to think about Zdeno Chara, who it's Hall of Fame weekend starting this weekend in Toronto. He's going to be inducted, the guy who played more games as a defenseman in the National Hockey League. It's pretty unique what he was able to do. Not only did he sign her as a long-term free agent, but he came in and he was immediately the captain. And I can't think of a situation off the top of my head around the league where that's happened. And it's not easy, I think, especially in this town. I've had this conversation in the past with Chief Johnny Busick, that being a captain in Boston is a little bit harder than some of the other markets around the National Hockey League.
Well, I mean, that's kind of weak. Like, why? Like, what? I mean, like, give me a reason why. I mean, they've had captains every single season. You can't figure, like, you can't look at Charlie McAvoy and say that's the guy who should be the captain of this hockey team.
Again, I think that they're waiting for someone to emerge. The Bruins, when you bring that up to
emerge,
them,
like they're paying him $9.5 million. He's been here for 7 years, 8 years. I mean,
shouldn't it be Pasta though? I feel like Pasta should be the captain. I think
Pasta's been here forever, so I don't know why it would be so difficult for him to be a captain in Boston.
Because he's too much of a happy-go-lucky party dude.
I think the other thing that the Bruins will point out is, okay, who was the captain in 1970, 1972? And they didn't have anybody that wore the C at that point. Now, there were some different reasons for that.
Only one of us in the room was alive then.
Yeah, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, but yes.
Who was it?
I mean, is it because they may be considering trading somebody that would be wearing the C? And
no, I don't think so. I think being a captain, and I'm not as familiar with the National Football League and how it works, and you have captains and guys that run your room and the responsibilities that they have. I don't know what that's like. I can tell you, I think in the National Hockey League, it's not hard because you have to be able to look after your own game, but you also have to look after everybody else's game, and that's not necessarily easy. And when you talk about being a captain in this market, it's a little bit harder to do it in Boston than, with all due respect, than it is in Columbus.
But don't you think that they gave McAvoy that contract because they thought he would be a captain and he hasn't shown them enough to be given it?
I disagree. I think they gave him that contract because he's an elite National Hockey League defenseman and a guy who could potentially be a captain down the road. So that's why they gave him that contract. When you talk about a guy like Charlie McAvoy in particular, I thought it was interesting. So The Athletic put out the NHL player poll, and one of the things that's listed in there is the hardest guys to play against in the National Hockey League. Charlie McAvoy's on that list.
He is?
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
But how many guys make what he makes and aren't a captain as defensemen?
I'd really have to look around the National Hockey League and be able to give you an answer. I'm guessing Adam Fox is making that kind of money. I don't think he's wearing the C in New York.
Yeah, see, I asked Ray Bork when was he in or did he call in? And see, in football, it's different because the players, we generally vote, right? And most of the time, it would be the guy that the coaches would even vote for. And that's why I asked Ray that. I said, I feel like if the players voted, it would 95% be the same guy that the coach would say, okay, I think he'd be a captain. That's why I feel like Pasta is that guy. I feel like a lot of guys look to Pasta. They respect him. on the ice. They respect what he does. They respect the way he carries himself. And I feel like the coaches would be like that as well. But in the NHL, it's more of a coach's decision.
Not necessarily. I think it varies from team to team, whether it's the players, the coaches, the management that's involved in some of that decision making. So it's difficult to say here with the Bruins. And with respect to a guy like David Pastrnak, I think of what he was able to do last year after all the changes and all the tumult, and the season that he had and the way he conducted himself. I think you could have easily made the case for him to be the MVP in the regular season in the National Hockey League based on the way that the NHL defines it, most valuable to your team. And he was absolutely outstanding.
I also, though, if you look at Pasta, very popular player, but does he have that hard-ass captain mentality where he could, yell at guys in the dressing room? I just...
Maybe not.
Right.
But, do you need that, though?
Language barrier. There could be a language barrier.
But did Bergeron have that, though?
Every day.
I think Bergeron.
I don't think Bergeron had that. I'm going to yell and scream at you, and neither did Marchand.
But I bet some players were scared of Marchand and Bergeron. They didn't want to disappoint them. I just don't know if Pasta has that same presence. He is such a popular guy that people love, but does he have that captain ability? I don't know.
Bergeron was scared of Keefe.
I believe that was Marchand.
Yeah, it was.
But I do think, in the bigger picture, a lot of these guys, they grow into that role. When you think of a guy like Brad Marchand in particular, his first few years in Boston, I think if you look at the type of player he was, the way he played, what he was like, could you have envisioned him wearing the C?
No.
I think most people would say no.
He grew into that.
He absolutely grew into it. I think that was being around some great leaders. It was also being around and tied to the hip with a guy like Patrice Bergeron. And there's no question he grew in. He was a really good captain. And I think after Patrice Bergeron left, I think Brad Marchand did a tremendous job of carrying on the tradition and what it means to be a Bruin in that room.
Some say this is the most important month in the NHL season, at least the first 8 months of it or 6 months of it, whatever. And Thanksgiving is not that far away. I hate saying it because winter's here. But what do you think when Cam Neely, Don Sweeney are looking at this team? Where does this team need to be in a couple weeks at Thanksgiving for them to not sell some parts of it?
Well, I think you still want to be in striking distance, and I think most of these teams, while the marker is, okay, you want to be in a playoff position by Thanksgiving in the United States. I think that some of those teams, Greg, when you see some of those teams that are maybe just on the outside, that doesn't necessarily mean that they sell immediately. It has been a good harbinger of, okay, this is a team that's going to make the playoffs. I know I've referenced Elliot Friedman in the past, and one of the things that Elliot likes to look at, one of the most respected guys in Canada and around our game, he likes to look at how many points you're out on November 1st. And, the league is so jumbled that it really doesn't have an assessment this year. So I think if the Bruins were in a position that they were far out of it, and I just don't see it at this point with Thanksgiving approaching, then maybe then you'd have to, make a different assessment. But at this point, they're right in the thick of it, as are a lot of teams in the NHL. And if you look at the standings, so Montreal's at the top. They have fewer regulation wins than the Bruins. They've cleaned up in overtime in the shootout. So that tells me that the Bruins can compete with every team that's in the Atlantic. They've already registered some quality wins, against teams like Colorado or Carolina or Washington. So I think that they're going to be in the mix. And even if for some reason by U.S. Thanksgiving they are maybe a few points out of the playoffs, I don't think that that's going to change the calculus for guys like Donnie Sweeney and Cam Neely.
Judd, I think the biggest question that people always want to know, whether it's the Bruins, the Celtics, the Red Sox, the Patriots, is this team good enough to not just compete for a playoffs spot? Is this team good enough to make a legitimate run?
That's a really good question. I think at this point, I think that the furthest that the Bruins would go is that this is a team that they believe, if they play to their identity, can make a run at a playoff spot. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about another step forward. So I don't know if they're necessarily at that point. But you have between now and, as Greg pointed out, here we are in early to mid-November, and you've got the trade deadline that's going to take place months from now, and you've got some assets if you're in the system. I think we brought this up last time. The Bruins have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year. I don't know if they're necessarily going to take 4 guys in the draft. So I could see them using some of those assets to help them out and gain a player that would push them into that conversation. Plus, they've got some young kids that are starting to populate their system. The Bruins actually, they cranked out a prospect report. It's been really helpful for guys like me to be able to track, some of the kids who are playing in college hockey, who are playing in junior, who are playing in the U.S. League, who are playing in Europe. They're starting to assemble some assets that they can use potentially to get them some players to get to that spot, Wiggy.
Okay. Well, we will see you on television this evening. Say hello to Brick for us.
I will.
Say hello to Sophia for us.
I will. Absolutely.
I don't know. I caught our guy PJ Stock the other night. I don't know.
He's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, rough go the first night, but he was better, I thought, the second
Hey,
night.
anybody can do an easy game. Yeah. Try and talk about it when the team's getting trounced 7-2. No, I love PJ, and he was regaling us with some stories after the game. I think the following day at the Garden, some of his bouts in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, he's got some great stories.
Oh, he's awesome.
Yeah. All right, Judd Sirott.